So I'm back with a rather curious selection of vinyl that I've pulled off the shelf. These are some albums that I've never heard anybody in the YouTube vinyl community talk about, and they are the Dragon Quest Symphonic Suites. These are collections of symphonic orchestral arrangements of video game music from the Dragon Quest series, which was wildly popular in Japan and middling at best in terms of success in the United States. And I have picked these up because I really like the Dragon Quest game series, and these are like really rare, and I think they're cool. So let's talk about them. The first one is the Dragon Quest Suite. This was released on ALTY Records, which is a label I don't know much at all about. This was released in 1986 alongside the release of Dragon Quest for the Japanese Famicom system. Now, this game would eventually come over to the United States as Dragon Warrior. Most people who know this game probably know it because they got a free copy with a subscription to Nintendo Power Magazine. But it's actually a great classic video game with some really great music in it. While in the United States, video game music has never been like a real profitable industry. In Japan, things like anime soundtracks, video game soundtracks were always much more popular. People actually paid to buy these things and listen to them. Now, this vinyl record is really an interesting package. I love this cover because it's got the Japanese box art. The American version of the box art was absolutely terrible. They tried to make it more palatable to a Western audience and less like the Akira Toriyama illustration that it is. Anime wasn't a big thing here until probably the 90s at the earliest, and so this just didn't fly over here. Great album cover, and on the back it's got a world map where the game takes place, and it's flanked on either side by actual screenshots that were very clearly just photographs of the game on a CRT television. It's just really weird. It's a weird thing, nothing like anything I've seen in the United States, and I just think it's really, really cool. Now, that's not where the cool stuff ends by any means. The liner notes that are included here are absolutely fantastic. Just a big page that has all of the songs in Japanese with how long each of them are. Gives you the tracks on the A side and the B side. Some interesting notes about who actually participated in the recording of this, because this isn't just a record full of video game chiptune music. These are an orchestral arrangement of many of the key tracks from this game. They were performed by the Tokyo Strings Ensemble, conducted by Koichi Sugiyama, who's the composer of these songs. And they're really great renditions of what would have been relatively simple sounding songs on the hardware at the time. Side B is also really, really interesting because the first track on Side B is 13 minutes and 41 seconds. It's called the Dragon Quest Game Original Sound Melody. Now, if you put this on, it's basically just 13 and a half minutes of someone playing the video game. So it's music recorded directly off of a Famicom, which is what we would have called the Nintendo Entertainment System, including the sound of someone navigating the menus. You can hear the sound effects of the warrior in this game hitting the characters in a turn-based JRPG style battle. It's really kind of strange, but also really interesting. The other 8 tracks on Side B are the synthesized versions of these songs. That's not music recorded directly from the video game console, but rather synthesizer arrangements of those songs. Overall, this is kind of an interesting novelty as someone growing up in the United States, never having access to something like this. I actually bought this imported from Japan. My copy is in fairly good condition on the outside. The vinyl itself is a little noisy in some places, but This thing's so rare, I don't know that I'd be able to get a replacement copy. I'm fine with a little bit of crack and hiss that I get from this record, but super, super cool. Now, while Dragon Quest, or Dragon Warrior as we knew it in the United States, may not have been a huge success over here, it was at least successful enough in Japan to get a sequel release in 1987, and alongside the release of Dragon Quest II came the Dragon Quest II Symphonic Suite. This is fairly similar to the release of the soundtrack for the first game, but it's a little bit of a higher quality release. If you look at the back, it still has a map of the game world, along with snapshots from the game itself, and of course the track listing. Much like the Dragon Quest I Symphonic release, Side A has orchestral versions performed by the Tokyo String Ensemble, arranged and conducted by Koichi Sugiyama, and they're really great renditions of the music from this game, which was similar in some respects, but also a step forward. The same types of melodies that were in Dragon Quest I would continue throughout the entire series, all the way up to Dragon Quest XI. Great game, by the way. Dragon Quest II, you can tell, is a big step forward in terms of the composition of these songs, and the Tokyo String Ensemble did a great job here. What's different about this is that Tokyo String Ensemble had some extra accompaniment on many of these songs, including drums, guitar, bass, and keyboards. It seems on Side A to bounce back and forth between very much orchestral focused pieces to what I can only describe as mid-80s Japanese pop music, almost like what you might hear as a theme song from an 80s anime. They're really fun, they're really cool. I think it keeps the pacing of this album better for the casual listener who may not be wanting to sit down and listen to an entire side full of orchestral arrangements. This has some pop sensibility to it. It's a lot of fun. And then you flip it over to Side B, and it begins with the Dragon Quest II game original sound story from opening to finale. Now, this is 25 minutes of gameplay, and it's a little bit different than the gameplay from the first one. You can tell it's a higher quality capture, and there's a kind of a curious stereo effect that's added to it. I don't know how exactly they recorded it. It's really different and interesting, and actually a great way to listen to the music from the actual game. Overall, you can tell that this is a higher quality release. It must have been enough of a success with that first game that they were like, okay, let's step it up. We can charge 2,500 yen for this thing. People are gonna snap it up. It's gonna be great. My copy, again, imported from Japan, is, as you can see, not in the best shape. There's some pretty significant water damage to both the jacket and the liner notes. It's not completely destroyed by any means, but it's not a perfect copy of this album. But in contrast, the vinyl itself is actually flat as a board. It plays absolutely pristinely. Much better than my copy of the Dragon Quest I Symphonic Suite, actually. And it's a good thing I was able to get this a couple of years ago when I picked up the first one, because this thing is very difficult to come by. I don't know that I could get a nicer replacement for this without spending a lot of money. And lastly, we have the Dragon Quest III Symphonic Suite. This was released also on ALTY Records in 1988. This is the soundtrack for Dragon Quest III, which for many people is where the series really gets good. This is an awesome game. I mean, I played all of the Dragon Quest games except for Dragon Quest X, which never came to the United States. And that means, like the first two releases, we get this really awesome Akira Toriyama box art on the front. And then on the back, we have no world map, oddly enough, but we still get pictures of the game. We've got a gatefold. This is a picture of the world map. It bears a certain resemblance to the map of the world, actually. our world, like the real world. The liner notes for this release are even a step up from the first two releases. We have an actual 4-page booklet filled with sheet music, but also this thing here, which I have no idea what that says, but on the back side it does display who all worked on this release. And this release is interesting because they're no longer working with the Tokyo String Ensemble. They stepped it up. They must have paid the big bucks to get the NHK Symphony Orchestra, or rather the Nippon Hoso Kyokai Symphony Orchestra. This is a much larger band with a bigger, more bombastic performance, producing a fuller sound, which to be honest is exactly what Koichi Sugiyama's compositions deserve. Rather than being a single LP, this is actually a double LP. Both side 1 and 2, so the first entire LP, are orchestral arrangements, and it's not until side C that you get the game original sound story. And this is almost 30 minutes of gameplay recordings. Now, in my opinion, the characteristics of this gameplay recording are less good than the recordings included in the Dragon Quest II Symphonic Suite, but it's still a really great recording of what are expansions of the musical ideas that Koichi Sugiyama worked on in the first two games. Luckily, mine is overall pretty clean copy. Very glad to have it. It's super, super fun. Now, if you know anything about the Dragon Quest series, you know that there was a 4th game released for the Famicom in Japan, and of course it came over to the United States as Dragon Warrior 4. That also got a vinyl release, but that one's very difficult to come by. I would be willing to pay like $100 for a copy of that, even one that is close to as good as my copy of Dragon Quest II, which you saw had a bit of water damage. I would love to complete the quadrilogy of that first generations of Dragon Quest games, because they're unique. They have a cool sound, and it's one of my favorite video game series. Of course, I may never get that 4th album. And I'll be happy with the 3 that I have. Guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you're really enjoying yourself, I'm not going to stop you. There's a link in the description section below where you can buy some pretty cool medium quality merch. Until next time, guys, keep spinning that good stuff. What a time to be alive.